Oh, we're streaming live and there's no action. Oh,
Oh, hey, I know that link. Oh,
Well, there was something. Did you come prepared for entertaining us, Brian? Just,
I'm here for the ride.
okay.
Sleigh
that-
ride. I get the privilege of seeing you twice today.
Twice in one day.
I will not
Once you
let you
see me, you
figure it
can't get
out
rid of
as
me.
who you really are. I will not ruin Christmas for all the children of Rockland.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you. He does every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
I think it's great because I'm going, okay, so Sue Sullivan, and I haven't seen it in the Village Voice. It was called out, as LHOA rep. And so I'm like, okay, what happened? I don't know. I have to be present to find out what happens,
Yeah.
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 Been a challenging year for everybody, so.
It has
overall.
been.
Yeah, it certainly
Has been.
has. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm not on the board at LHOA anymore.
no,
No,
No.
I'm the
I
rep
just,
in this area, but
I'd get hit up every year and I'm like, I'm not retired.
yeah.
I don't have the time. If I had the time, I'd certainly invest it, into, because I love, it's a great community.
Great community, for sure.
Yeah. But I'll see what we got going on here today. No, there's nothing from HCA, I think, on the docket. But we'll see what pops up. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do we have all the members of the board here at this time?
If there are 5 members and Kristen is a moderator, yes, from my count.
hi, nope, I work with Tom over at the Hillcrest.
That's 6.
Isn't Deb one of the rent control board members now? I forget who's on there. It's been so long since I've seen faces.
I know it. This is my first time on it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got you,
Likewise.
me, Brian. And then I don't know.
I think there's 2 others, Debbie Roby
Yes.
and Carol Primavera.
Okay. Not sure. But I know Deb Roby is supposed to be here.
Yeah.
So,
This is who I have as the current members: Susan Sullivan, Casey Kidd, who's been on the board, Carol Ann Primavera from Hometown, Deborah Ann Roby, Brian Kane, and Eileen Senior. Am I pronouncing that correct, Eileen?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
So I think we're waiting for Deborah, correct?
Mhm.
One of the first, the meeting, we'll say that we're not opening the meeting, but one of the first orders of business is that you probably need to organize and name a chair. So you probably have to, so you can ruminate on that question: who wants the thankless task of being the chairman of the rent control board?
Mhm.
Um, I had a mute for a minute. Were there any nominations?
I think we're still waiting for Deb to connect.
Okay.
I'm not sure the person who just joined us. Could you tell us your name? I think you're actually muted.
Eileen, talking to me?
Oh, someone else just joined the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Asking for us to wait a minute.
Okay there, hi. Trying to figure out how to do this. Okay, Ava Hautala and Gina Rossano representing the Manufactured House Federation. For some reason, I can't pull this meeting up on my computer. Would anybody have a clue why?
No.
I think most of us are watching on a computer, so I'm not quite sure why.
Yeah,
you
this
would
is
be able
weird.
to.
I use Zoom all the time. I have a Zoom account and it is not letting me in.
So at this point, we're still waiting for Carol Ann Primavera and Deb Roby, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Allow.
You might want to try on your phone.
I have
That's-
you up on my phone. I'm trying to pull it up on the computer.
Oh, okay.
It's downloaded. Why? I don't know why it's not doing it. Download it again. I just used it this morning. I know it's on here. Crazy. Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I think I might have it. Yep. Yeah, got it.
Yay.
Signing up on the phone. I have to figure out how to do that. There we go.
Oh, I know that Deb and Carol Ann were copied on the notices. Unless there's an objection, maybe we give it to 5:45 and then begin.
Mhm.
Okay.
Until Zoom times out.
Well, it doesn't appear that they're going to be joining us. So with a quorum present of Casey Kidd, Susan Sullivan, Brian Kane, and Eileen Cena, any one of you four board members can just declare the meeting open, and then we can move forward from there.
I'll declare the meeting open.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
Some people are on mute, so I don't,
For the purposes of tonight, and I think you might want to delay formal organization, but until you have everyone present. But for the purposes of this evening, maybe you could just vote to name a chairman for this evening. Would be my suggestion.
Brian, would you be willing to be the chairman for this evening?
Well, as long as it's this evening,
For this evening.
sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
So is there a motion to make Brian Kane the chair?
I will make that motion to make Brian Kane the chair for this evening only.
Second,
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the meeting is yours.
Well, actually, I'll turn it over to you to open with agenda for the evening.
We have two items of business for this evening. One is a petition for a general rent increase for Hillcrest. And the second is to hear petitions for eviction, also filed by Hillcrest. Maybe we could just start with the petitions for eviction, and I suggest you turn it over to Mark Laverty, who represents the park owner.
Good evening, Mr. Kane and other board members. My name is Mark Laverty, and I represent Hillcrest Manufactured Home Community. My client submitted a petition back in May of 2021 for the 2021 rent adjustment petition. That petition covers a period of July 1st of 2021 through June 30th of 2022. As you can see in our petition, we submitted all of the required documentation. Section 1 was the annual registration statement and the current rent roll, where the current rent at this community is $672 per month. Section 2 of the petition is the actual owner's petition for a rent adjustment, whereby they're seeking a rent increase of 0.4% based upon the CPI in accordance with the rent control rules and regulations. That amounts to an increase of $2.64 per month. So that would bring the total monthly rent for each home site to $674.64. That amount does include the $12 licensing fee that's required by each resident to pay, which gets turned over to the Commonwealth. So I have the petition. I'm not sure if the board had any questions. I have the property manager here tonight who can answer any questions, but we're seeking the rent increase in accordance with the current rent roll rules and regulations. It's a 0.4% increase, $2.64 per month per home site.
Okay. I guess this is where I step in, huh? First, is there a motion on the floor to approve or otherwise from the committee? Or any discussion?
I'd like to discuss,
Please.
as far as the evictions go, in order to give a certificate of eviction, the evictee needs to be present in the meeting. We need to hear from both sides what the discrepancy is, what it's over, and then be able to make a decision. So we can't do that without that person present.
I think we said we were going to do the eviction petitions first, but Attorney Laverty has presented the petition for increase first, so I think we could deal with the evictions after that. Casey,
Okay,
if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. I also figured we could discuss that. So right now, Hillcrest has no contract with the current owners to be eligible for a back rent increase. A contract must be established. We also should have open books with the company. I don't believe they're allowed to have closed books. And in our case, because there was never a rent control contract established, the CPI is null and void. So I think that that's something that we should begin to discuss first before moving forward.
Wow. um, uh, I'm gonna defer to John for a moment, but um, isn't that a violation of rent control in general? And I'm not an attorney in my experience in affordable housing. So, John, do you have anything to weigh in on that comment there?
I will definitely weigh in, but I think I'd defer to Attorney Laverty to address the statements by Ms. Kidd.
So I guess I'm unsure of what the statements are between Ms. Kidd. I mean, the town of Rockland set forth community accommodation rents and eviction statutes that allows the landlord to come in for an increase. And in this case, the landlord came in with the CPI increase, which was a portion of the rent control statute that they're allowed to do based upon the CPI, which doesn't require any sort of evidentiary hearing. The only time that a rent increase can be denied by the rent control board is if there's some sort of substantial deterioration or failure to perform ordinary repairs, replacement, or maintenance by the manufactured home community, or there are some outstanding state sanitary code violations or any sort of finding from the board or some sort of unresolved order or judgment from either the housing court or the district court. Neither of those are present here today. So my client's position is they're allowed to ask for CPI increase, and it can be only denied under those two limited circumstances. And I haven't heard any testimony regarding any of those issues.
I recall that repairs and things like that were being done. Were those all completed, the ones that were required at the last time we met?
It's my understanding there are presently no outstanding state sanitary code violations with the Rockland Board of Health. All those other issues have been resolved. There are some ongoing repairs that are happening at the community, but there are no outstanding state sanitary code violations.
Okay.
Is the sump pump system being hooked up to a generator, is that not a sanitary violation?
I'm not aware of any violations where my client's been cited.
Okay, yes, I know that the Board of Health and the Building Department aren't very keen on their responsibilities right now. My other question is the fair net operating income. I know that anything over 4% is reasonable, and the company makes well over that right now. And I also know that the contract that was made before between the town and Hometown America that was seen in front of a judge, that was 12 years ago, and the contract only lasted 10 years, which means that for the past 2 years, Hillcrest itself has not been under any contract to only base it on CPI, which is why I think it's important that we open the books in order to determine the fair net operating income.
So my
Yes.
position is that that was a settlement agreement that happened a number of years ago. My client's not looking to establish any sort of rent for the fair net operating agreement, and I don't believe that the board has the ability to go back on that. My client has asked for a CPI increase. 0.4% is most certainly reasonable under the circumstances, and I think this board has an obligation to approve that.
I guess in terms of fair net operating income, when rent control passed in Rockland in 2007, there was a lot of litigation between 2007 and 2010. But candidly was costing the town tens of thousands of dollars a year for rent control, which was sold to the residents of Rockland as something that wouldn't cost them anything. What we negotiated over the course of several court cases, and Mr. Laverty was party to that negotiation along with attorneys from Hometown, we arrived at an agreement that we would use CPI as a standard for general rate increases. Over the course of the past, I'm going to say 10 years where we've used CPI, the rent increases have averaged probably less than 2% per year. The rent increase that's before the board tonight is 0.4%. If the rent control board were to reject this, I think the gross income that Hillcrest would net as a result of this is about $2,800. It seems to me that the town would have to give, when I say the town, I mean the Board of Selectmen would have to give serious consideration whether they were going to pay their attorneys to litigate over such a small increase. The bottom line is that the CPI approach has worked extraordinarily well for the residents. And I think that the board should be, for the board to reject this, and Attorney Laverty has correctly cited the standards for rejection under the rent control rules and regulations. I think for the board to reject this could result in a far more costly outcome for residents. 0.4% is, what is it, $2 and change per month. It seems like there would be a great risk to residents. They could end up more. The first couple of petitions that came in before we adopted CPI were double-digit rate increases, far more substantial than 0.4%. So it's my recommendation that the petition for rent increase meets the standards under the rent control bylaw and meet the standards under the rent control rules and regulations as adopted by the Rockland Rent Control Board.
Thanks, John. Should we turn this over for a motion for the rent increase?
We should ask if there's any members of the public that wish to be heard on this before the board votes.
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
I would like to speak, please.
Any speakers should identify themselves by name and address, Mr. Chair.
I would like to speak. My name's Kayla Kaczynski. I live at 27 Balsam Street in Hillcrest.
Welcome.
I have been waiting over a year for them to do work to my house. They also recently sent out a letter about heat tape and how we need to get heat tape, but I swear in the Attorney General law and in the rules, it says that the heat tape would be done by the park, like that's their responsibility. The point of connection to the home, from what I understand, is at the home, like in the floor, not at the water meter. So I wasn't sure like how that worked, and they've never given us heat tape, and we just found out that they were supposed to do that. So like, I don't know how that works. And they're also trying to say now that they're not accepting check or money order for rent, which I thought should also be, I thought was illegal, but you had to be able to accept some type of check or money order. So like to put the rent up and not even be able to pay it is kind of crazy.
For you, Mr. Chair, I don't know if there's somebody from Hillcrest that can address those questions.
There is Mr. Lehan. Tom Lehan is here, and he should be able to address both of those issues.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Lennon. I'm the property manager here for Hillcrest Community. Appreciate everyone's joining today. The publication we put out regarding heat tape was included in a document that had many other suggestions on how to keep everyone safe during the holidays and the cold weather coming in. Included heat tape, insulating a roof, drain hose spigot. There's a lot of things, insulating windows. So in terms of what the person who just spoke up, Kayla, regarding whose responsibility, that's something that I'd have to investigate. We understand we provide, utilities to the trailers, but it's not my understanding that we're responsible for installing heat tape for the unit. The check and money order request was a recent request by our company. As technology and innovation comes on, we want to make sure we're assisting the residents to have them use a electronic funds transfer format, which we've been using for many years, as well as I think Hometown America. We haven't changed that. And we also have an online portal payment system. This allows the flexibility for the residents to actually make payments, control their payments, and make adjustments as they need to. We were accepting checks through a door which was vandalized at some point, and we had to facilitate a new door in order to avoid any sort of further violation with vandalization. And the request is, we will take a check if we need to, but we've been advised as a company that electronic payments is the way we're moving forward.
Last year when the Board of Health agent came to inspect the park, she's the one that said that you guys were responsible for the heat tape, just so you know.
Okay, as I mentioned, thanks, Kayla. We're gonna have to do some investigation on that. I got here in February of last year. There were only a couple of issues that occurred with that, but and those folks took care of that themselves. So that's something we'll certainly look into, and I might seek Mr. Laverty's advice on that as well, as he may have further dialogue on that.
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Lehman, maybe you could take Kayla's contact information and reach out to her directly.
Will do.
Any other public comments or questions? I think that's appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, please, anybody.
Brian,
Another thing is none of these residents, I only knew about this meeting because of Casey. No other residents in here knew about this meeting. So nobody can come to talk to say what their problems are or anything like that.
Okay. All right, this is our very first meeting, so I'm not certain how the outreach went, but Kayla, we hear you. I know that in Leisure Woods, anything that comes out of the pad, if you will, is the homeowner's responsibility. And any notice about heat tape might be as minor as just having it inspected to make sure it's working, which is the best route to go. It might cost you, it might be $30 or $40, but having it looked at can't hurt. I know I have it too. And so just however things work out, I hope everything works out well for you. So.
David, do you and Gina have any insight into that
Yeah, that's
issue?
why I'm raising my hand. I would like to speak for a moment if I may.
Okay, we can't see you.
Yeah, I'm right here.
I know, but there's only so many images. I can see you now, of course.
Sorry.
I just couldn't
Okay.
see you. I couldn't.
I've
see
got
you.
mine on the full gallery, so I see everybody. Well, everybody who's got the
God
camera
bless
open.
you. How are
Anyway,
you?
hi guys. Ava Hautala, as I mentioned before, Gina and I are on the board of the Manufactured Home Federation. And number one, the point of connection has been established, and it does not occur at the meters outside of the house. In point of fact, it occurs where everything comes into the house. So the heat tapes, technically those pipes are the responsibility of the park owner, and therefore the heat tapes should be as well. Now, Brian is correct. I normally only pay $25 to have mine inspected, but if they do need to be replaced, it's to the tune of hundreds of dollars. So that is a very, very important thing for a lot of people who are on significantly limited incomes. So that really needs to be considered. Number two, the fair net operating income isn't an option. It is the law. It is what has been set forth by the attorney generals. CPI may have worked. There may have been an agreement 12 years ago, and that was something that
basically the judge says, well, this is the way it's supposed to be done, but y'all are agreeing to it, so okay. And that's the only reason that contract was allowed to stand. The law is clear. Any rent increase is supposed to be based upon fair net operating income. My question is, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it before, but the comment was something along the lines that everything has been considered for this rent increase. And yes, I would agree with you. A 0.004 or 0.4, whatever it is, seems like not a lot, but a precedent is being set. That's the problem. So I would urge you all to very carefully consider what you are doing and how you are doing it.
If I may, Mr. Chair. We have been doing it this way for several years, as
Yes.
we indicated.
Mhm.
And it has worked out for the residents. I guess the question would be, if you're advocating that the rent control board deny this increase, and they do deny it, and the park owner takes us to court, will you be representing the tenants through the course of litigation?
I would have to talk to the Federation, and they would be the ones that would make the decision. I cannot make that decision unilaterally.
You're asking this board to deny this increase. I mean, are you
For
going
now,
to?
I'm proposing a temporary hold to it until this is looked at more thoroughly.
I mean, is your organization telling the tenants of Hillcrest that they will fare better under?
Nobody is
formula?
saying anything like that whatsoever. All we are.
Will you
proposing-
concede that they could end up paying a lot more than CPI? Okay.
True, but they have to prove that they, when the owners put forth the proper paperwork, they have to prove that that the increase is warranted. That's the issue.
So will your organization pay for a consultant to analyze the books of a park owner?
That's your job.
That's your,
make that
that's not your job, but that's the job of the rent control board and the people in the town. They should be doing their jobs.
One of the reasons this is delayed, and this petition, as council indicated, was filed, I think, in the summer, because we couldn't get volunteers to serve on this board. So we finally have gotten it up to 6 out of a possible 7-member board. So the request, the position of your organization is that 7 volunteers who don't get paid anything for this should undertake the financial analysis of a major corporation like
That's the
Hillcrest
job.
Hometown.
That's what you volunteered for.
That's the job of the rent control board.
That's not, they volunteered for.
I
system with
understand
rules
that,
and
but that's their
regulations that
job.
Don't do that.
So we can contact the Attorney General's office and see what Dan Less has to say.
You know,
You could
in all
do
due
that.
respect, if I might, Ava
Sure.
and
Sure.
Gina, I know you both and I respect you both very, very much.
Thank you, sir.
But this is getting a little hostile.
No, I'm sorry, I don't,
But
Brian.
the
I
fact
don't-
is, no, the fact is that before I took this on, there are very rigid things that the board can do and can't do. And they can't undertake an independent investigation or
Then
what
follow the
have
rules.
you themselves. It's not our job. We're asked to come as open-minded people
Mhm.
representing Hometown America or Leisure Woods Association or yourself or the group that you're representing tonight, Hillcrest and Live Oaks and everybody, and being totally object, to what the confines of this committee is. This is kind of a ad hoc. We're not in any position of authority, which, I mean, my first year at the meeting, I was with Gina and we were there and it was frustrating and everybody was, I think it was about a 2 point something, whatever increase that year.
Mhm.
And we went up to, and we were told straight out from actually John, the council, that, how we had to go about certain types of business. And the rent control board isn't the place that this has to all be done. Is it a place it can be done? Sure. But we've gone through our tutorial in what our restrictions are. And what you're asking from the rent control board is way beyond anything that anybody signed up on. And if
Mhm.
if it becomes like steadfast that has to happen, you're gonna see all these screens go black in front of you.
Mhm.
So I'm here in an effort to try to help, in any
Understood,
way I can.
understood. And I applaud those people who have stepped forward to try to help facilitate things. Where I'm coming from is simply a matter of what the law says. And that's it. I can
Well,
only tell
that's
you.
your organization's
I can,
perception
no,
of the
I can
law.
only
The
tell you. what
fact
the
is
law
that
says.
rent control was voted out by voters in Massachusetts in 1994. And there is technically and legally, there is no rent control in Massachusetts. And what it is that a lot of people did a lot of work and spent a lot of money, attorneys and otherwise, to get certain places. So if you go into the town hall, you see that residents like in Hillcrest or Leisure Woods are hashed out, okay, as being, special places, because somehow through a lot of effort, an attorney I work with, who's retired now, worked on getting rent control for residents of Leisure Woods and Hillcrest in other communities in Rockland and other communities to maintain these little hamlets.
Mhm.
And we're closer to losing it than we are to building strength in it,
That's not true.
with the exception of what the newly elected mayor in Boston wants to do and is trying to negotiate with the governor privately. But the voters eliminated rent control in 1994. So the fact we have any rent control is a blessing.
You're not quite 100% correct on that, Brian. I'm sorry. There's no rent control for tenants renting apartments, things like that. The only place where rent control does still stand in Massachusetts is our situation, manufactured housing.
And it
So
took a
there
lot of
is
money to
rent
get there.
control.
It took
Sorry,
a lot
sir?
of money and work to get there.
Right, but the rent control does exist with regard to the manufactured housing.
Right.
You said it was voted out.
every year, there's a struggle and a debate about it and how it should be rated. And the CPI seemed like a logical thing. Now, if we really look at this year's CPI, that 0.4% or whatever Hillcrest asking for is spit in the ocean. Okay, because the real CPI this year is a hell of a lot higher than that. And we'll be
Brian,
dealing
if
with
I
that.
may interject,
Hi.
sorry to interrupt you. I hear what you're saying, and I do appreciate your opinion. Obviously, we're on the board together. The issue, though, is that we are the highest paying park just about in Massachusetts. And what is a spit of money to you, a spit in the ocean, maybe it's a spit in the pool or the clubhouse that you have, but we don't have these things. And we don't have maintenance like you have. Even Mr. Clifford had stated at the last meeting, for the past 5 years, he's heard the same complaints from residents and not much has changed. And I think that it's fair from our perspective to at least consider the fact that even though CPI might be a small increase every single year, it's not always correct. They should be looking at the fair net operating income. If they're taking in $500,000 per year from 75 homes, and they're just this year have finally painted a speed bump because the manager went out on his hands and knees with a bucket of paint that barely cost anything, is it fair for us residents to continually be paying this? I mean, it's a business. As a consumer, you want to get what you're paying for.
Okay, so I appreciate that, and and I'm sorry if I seemed unsensitive to Hillcrest specifically with the amount of the increase asked, because the amount of the increase is going to be asked, well, that's going to go into effect tomorrow for hometown America people is going to be far greater. But that's a subject for another time. But yes, you definitely have some serious issues there, and I understand what you're asking for. The challenge is really out of this committee's hands. And again, I turn to John on the legalities of how we could go around to restructure something that was taken away and we've been fighting for. And it seems like every 10 years that we have to have representatives from the communities fighting to keep things the way they are versus them getting far worse. So if you go by actual expense and cost, I don't know how bad. I know Hillcrest. I understand where you're coming from, in reference to the amenities here, and we're very fortunate. There's been changes in management. There's all sorts of challenges everywhere along the line. So I don't think, anybody wants to see anybody penalized or paying more than they need to in any way, shape, or form. It's, but we're starting to, I've just got a thing on my screen. I don't know if anybody else has, but we're starting to run late on time. So I'm going to get shut off shortly. I don't know about anybody else.
I'd like to speak, if I may. This is Gina Rossano.
Hello, Gene.
Hi. I understand that this board, Rent Control Board, can say no to an increase to CPI. You can do that legally within the bounds of all your agreements, even though it's small. And just because it's so small, should make it very easy for you to understand that you don't have to say yes to this. There's a lot of problems in Hillcrest, a lot of problems. And they're not all being addressed, and they're not even being talked about tonight. And that if at the very least, postpone this increase and have a hearing about it and have a discussion about it. There are no members of the community here. They've not been invited. They haven't been told that this meeting is being held tonight. You can, in fact, say no to a CPI increase. So you have that right. You don't have to accept it. And you're making it sound like it has to be accepted.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Please.
one of the unique things about the Rent Control Board is that a representative of each park is appointed. Casey Kidd is the representative of Hillcrest. So it's unclear to me why it wouldn't have been, why people wouldn't have been noticed of this meeting. With regard to comments that Gina just made, if this board votes it down, you'll be violating your own rules and regulations, all right, which will
How's
certainly
that?
be subject to court challenge. Because we've established, the rules and regulations have been established, they've been in place for 10 years, that say it is under these conditions. One of the most difficult things that this board historically has had to deal with is we are not ombudsmen or representatives for tenants that have issues with their landlord. That is not the purview of this board. I completely respect and understand and sympathize with Kayla's comments about heat tape and basic things like that. But this board that meets once a year for a rent petition increase is not empowered to tell the landlord to fix things. And we went down this road and it really was not productive for anybody. So there are certainly places that, that your group could advocate, tell people where to go. If there's health issues, what we've tried to tell everyone is they need to go to the agency that can help them. If it's the building department, it's the Board of Health. And I know the health agent and the building commissioner have been down there quite a bit. So it's the question for the board tonight on this particular increase is 0.4%. In my opinion, the petitioner, the park owner, has met the standards that are required for an increase. If some other organization such as the manufactured home organization wants to challenge the rules and regulations or challenge the decision, I would only say to residents that they should be very wary of this because the rent increases they face could be far more substantial than what they've seen over the past several years.
Okay, open discussion.
There you go.
mean-
So, John, I'm sorry, can you clarify for me if they were to be, if they wanted to change it to be not the CPI, that would not apply to this particular increase anyway? Is that what I understand? Or would they have to change that and have some, I don't know what kind of legal work would need to be done to change that so that they would not be making the increase through CPI?
The board can certainly consider adopting new rules and regulations, including assessment of fees that would fund the cost of financial analysts, all those kinds of things, which ultimately would be paid for by our residents.
So if they had to have the financial assessments done, they would have to pay for that in addition to whatever increase was going to be made. Is that what I understand?
I think if this board were to adopt new rules and regulations, and we would have to have hearings on the new rules and regulations, and the ones you have right now are the subject of several hearings, you'd have to have hearings, and as part of it, I think you would have to consider adoption of a new fee structure to pay for this process. Again, when this was presented to the voters of Rockland, they were told it wouldn't cost them anything.
Mhm.
Are
Any
we
other-
able to postpone to maybe deliberate about, like as a board, what our options are and what might be best for residents?
Seems like a reasonable request to me, John, but I'll let you weigh in on that.
I mean, it's certainly in the purview of the board to do it. I would say that, this rent increase has already been delayed by a few months. So if you wanted to have another meeting to consider it, that's fine. But I think careful consideration should be given to the alternative. I was present under the alternative process, and it was not beneficial to residents. It was not beneficial to the town. So that's certainly, if you wanted to table it this evening, you could certainly do so. And then, but I would not recommend that you go more than a couple of weeks before you come back and consider it.
I don't know if this is a silly question, but are we able to meet as a board, just as a board, or do we need to meet in the public venue only? I'm not sure how that works.
All meetings of this board are open, subject to the open meeting law. We could
Okay.
certainly
I thought so.
meet it. We could certainly meet in person, and maybe that's the direction you want to go. It's Zoom seems to be getting better, not worse, not better for a lot of these meetings. We could convene a meeting and we could talk about it, but the public could certainly be there to witness it, if not necessarily give input.
Mhm.
Could we make a motion to do that, please?
You can do that, Casey.
Well, it's free to you to make a motion if you'd like.
I'd like to make a motion to table it for 2 weeks and then meet in person if possible.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess my basis is, what's the basis for the continuance? What's going to change between now and 2 weeks? My position is the Rockland Rent Control Board rules and regulations that were revised back in May of 2014 clearly allow my client to request a CPI increase. The members of the public have every right to attend these meetings. That's what's on for today. This goes back for a petition that was filed in May of 2021. And it just continues to get delayed, and I don't see any basis for it.
I think with the newly elected members that we should all just be able to think about it, discuss it, and be able to figure out what would be the best course of action. It might not change, but I just think that for everyone to be able to gather their thoughts and have those 2 weeks, I don't think that will be a huge substantial difference, because even if the increase is voted in, the company will still get 2 weeks of back rent if it is increased with CPI. So I think it would be beneficial for the board.
All right. Well, that leaves it open to a vote, I guess, at this point. If I get it right, John, we've got a motion and a second. If there's any other comments or discussion, it on the surface looks like a very small increase. It is our first meeting and our first vote, but we also have a lot more heavier work coming, our way with much larger increases. And that's not going to be pretty either. So I'll just put it out there.
Deb would like to say something. Deb Roby.
Please.
I don't know if you can see her.
You're actually muted, Deb.
Can you unmute, Deb?
Deb, you're muted.
I'm not doing well tonight. I thought the meeting was at 7. I apologize, I'm late. So I missed 90% of this. What specifically is the issue, why the increase isn't, it's a 0.4% increase? Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, and what specifically are the issues why this is not being voted on tonight and why it needs to be tabled, just briefly?
We have.
It
people
hasn't
who
been
are-
tabled.
Right, but people are from the manufactured home organization are challenging the legality of the process that the rent control board has used
Oh, I
for
see.
the last several years. And their position is that we should be doing fair net operating income, which requires a totally different process and analysis.
Right. My understanding was that way back when this was initiated, it took a long time for them to come up with the CPI as the basis of the income of the increases. I think it was quite an involved process from what I understand. So are we thinking that within 2 weeks we'll be able to change this? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, I believe the intent of the Hillcrest representatives was to give the new committee a little more time to kind of mull this over before they voted at this meeting. So
And
there's been a
specifically, what are we
motion
mulling? I'm just asking.
for everybody to just examine and listen to what Casey's, case was for us delaying it. There is a motion on the floor in a second, but there's been no vote. And that doesn't mean that a rent increase won't go into effect tonight or that it will be delayed for two weeks. I mean, for that matter, we'll be looking at all sorts of petitions and things from Hometown America at the end of the year.
Well,
So-
on what we're talking about at hand tonight, have there been complaints to departments or any sort of process that to any specific health board or the housing authority or whatever avenues that they need to go through? Has that been?
Well, unfortunately, you joined so late. So there has been
Yeah, I'm sorry.
some touch points.
Okay,
But again, I'll defer to John. I mean, I'm
Okay.
just temporary chair because I think I was one of two out of the whole group's mics that were on at the
Okay.
time. But and I used the reference spit in the ocean for the 4%, which, obviously was insensitive to Hillcrest people because any increase is considered, something they don't want. And I don't blame them. And they've had some specific issues, but there was a Kayla from the community that was concerned about certain things. So to kind of bring it up to speed a little bit,
Okay.
If I could, Mr. Chair,
please.
and this is something that we've hashed out quite a bit over the years as well. You know, there are always going to be concerns in any kind of a home development of that size, 80 units. But to my understanding, and Attorney Laverty, you can confirm this, there's no open or unresolved complaints before the Board of Health or the building department or anything like that.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. My client has been working with the Board of Health. They have an on-site property manager full-time since the last meeting, and there are no outstanding court cases, nothing in housing court or district court, and no health violations.
So can I just ask a question? I'm just a little thrown by the information presented by the Manufactured Home Confederation representatives. I don't want to do things that are illegal, obviously, because that's not okay. But I'm thinking that this is the way it's been, so it must have been done legally to begin with. And I don't know how it can be fixed without causing further expense for the people that we're trying to keep from having to pay more. That's where I'm getting hung up. And I guess that's why I wasn't really sure I want to make a vote, because I really don't know what I'm talking about. I need time to read and explore. But if you can give me simple answers for that, then that would be fine.
The process that we use now is part of a court settlement. So there's litigation between Hometown and the town of Rockland. And this particular structure was agreed to as part of an overall settlement of all the court cases. I think there was a federal case and a state court case, unless I'm mistaken, Mark. Is that correct?
That is correct, federal and state. And there are other cities and towns that have incorporated in their rent control rules and regulations that allow for CPI increases. So you know, my position is the Manufactured Home Federation isn't here with an attorney, and I think their argument is misplaced in these circumstances. These rules and regulations were revised in 2014, which clearly allow for a CPI increase.
So for right now, this is the perfectly logical, reasonable, legal way to move. If they chose to change this, it would behoove them to, at the park, to reconstruct their contract. Is that correct?
The only way that this could change would be for the Rent Control Board to consider new rules and regulations.
And where would those come from? Would those come from
From you folks.
We would come up with those.
Sure.
Okay.
And we'd be paying for it.
Not the process of the rules and regulations, but
well, I mean, who's truly qualified to rewrite, state statute on rent control?
I mean, I've been working with this board since 2008. But certainly, if the board, after due consideration, wanted to change the rules and regulations, I think it's easy for anyone to say that there's a better system and we should do it a different way. But the current system has benefited the residents of Hillcrest and the residents of Leisure Woods. So it's easy to say that, but I think the uncertainty that comes with it is something the board will have to seriously consider as part of any discussion to change the process.
Okay. And is the worst case scenario that we lose rent control?
Sure, it definitely is. I mean, if it goes before town meeting and gets repealed, yeah, that's the end of it.
Okay, thank you.
I just don't think it's really a matter of the rent increase per se, that it's just the 0.04%, but it's the fact that Hillcrest has been deteriorating. We've had issues with HUD, and I really just think that having this postponement for 2 weeks would really help to clarify what we're supposed to be doing. And I think that meeting in person will help us discuss that and have papers in front of us. And I just really think it's something that we should be able to think about.
Fair enough to me.
It's really the pleasure of the board at this point.
Is there a vote?
So Kayla's made a motion. I don't know if anybody actually seconded that motion.
I did,
Sue
I
did.
believe I heard a second.
you did.
Susan has seconded the motion.
Yes.
You want to call for a vote, Mr. Chairman?
So all those in favor,
I,
show of hands, something.
I don't think it would hurt.
So has everyone voted in favor of this? Not sure. We're recording the outcome. Were there anybody opposed to the motion? I guess it's a unanimous vote, Mr. Chairman. So the only other issue, and we'll circulate dates to try to get another date in a couple of weeks. The only other issue is the eviction petitions that were also filed by Hillcrest. Attorney Laverty should speak to those.
So Hillcrest has filed approximately 10 applications for certificates of eviction for non-payment of rent. I don't know how the board wants to handle those. I can go through them one at a time. I'll leave it up to the board's pleasure.
Mr. Laverty, could you just explain to the board what notice has been given to people in order to get to this stage?
Sure. So the first step in any process in Massachusetts in manufactured home communities, you have to serve, well, specifically for manufactured home communities, you have to serve a 30-day notice to quit for non-payment rent. That gets served upon the tenant by constable. It's sent by certified mail and first-class mail. That's the first step in the process. And then we have an obligation to come before the rent control board if the tenant has not cured that notice to quit. In other words, got their account current to seek a certificate of eviction. That simply just allows the landlord to go into either housing court or district court to commence an eviction action. The tenant gets served with a summary process complaint. The court will schedule, it's a two-tiered system. The court will schedule mediation where the parties meet to try to reach a resolution. If not, at some point, you'd get a hearing in front of a judge. More recently, because of COVID and people have struggled with the rent, the state of Massachusetts and the federal government has established 2 programs to assist tenants with RAFT applications or ERAP monies. And the courts and landlords encourage tenants, they have options that allow them to submit applications to get some of this rent paid. And I found in the past, the only way to get people to come to the table, submit the applications is if you start the process to get into court. But the board's position tonight is to basically give the landlord permission to start the eviction process in court. So all the applications for certificates of eviction that I have before the board tonight have all been served to the appropriate legal 30-day notice to quit, and they all still have outstanding balances. There were some submitted to the board early on, but those people have brought their account current, so those are not before the board at this time.
I'm assuming these are all contracts and agreements to pay rent electronically or otherwise. Listening to what Casey spoke about how they collected rent, and the question about accepting other forms of payment. So, COVID certainly knocked the wind out of a lot of people. I don't think there's probably anybody in this board that wasn't touched by it in one way or another, or may still be, and I hope not. I guess to John, I'm not, we don't have all this paperwork in front of us of the evictions and who they are and what the violations are, and evictions are a pretty serious thing to consider. How many are there? And sorry.
So Attorney Laverty, who are the names of the tenants at this point?
So I have one for Arthur Nordgren, Judith Dwyer, William Drosis, Hillary Dyke, Sandra Davy, Susan Yalencian, Gary Hornbaker, Edward Trainer, and William Adams, and Robert Costa.
Wow.
So I just want to make it clear that this isn't to the point because the board decides on a certificate of eviction. The individuals are not evicted from their home. They're still allowed due process, and they have every right to defend themselves in court, have a hearing if they wish. This is just the only step that the landlord needs to take before they can start the court process.
So as far as I'm aware, we need to first send out a notice to these residents to be present for a meeting in which then each case is individually discussed on the matter. And then we will decide on that individual basis whether or not we will give the certificate of eviction.
Well, it's up to the rent control board to send notice. I've submitted the certificates of eviction with the rent control board along with the appropriate $75 for each case. And I don't know whether the board did that or not. I can't answer that question.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that you did anything incorrectly as far as that goes. I'm saying as far as the board goes, we need to follow our process in order to allow for the certificate to be given or not.
Correct. I agree with that. Sure.
We're going to meet again in 2 weeks. We'll take the time and verify that all these notices went out. And I think the board should probably table this for 2 weeks as well.
Yeah, John, thank you for that, because I'm sitting here thinking this is heavier than the rent. And it's affecting many people's lives. So it's like, this is even a more difficult decision, I think, from the heart than it is to say, well, what's a point for? But when you listen to everything, I guess we all kind of want to sit back and digest it a little bit. It seems to be, the majority. I don't see the outcome being much different in 2 weeks, to be truthful with you, as sad as it sounds on either case, but that's my take on it. And I'll turn it over to anybody who wants to say anything.
I think one thing I do know from reviewing the notices is that they really try to emphasize the aid programs that are available to try to encourage tenants to seek aid. While COVID created unprecedented hardship, there was also, I think, pretty historic support that's out there. We want to make sure that people avail themselves of that support before anybody has to make a hard decision on eviction. I think
Just for
Attorney Laverty would agree with that.
I would agree. Just so everybody knows, there's Chapter 257 here in Massachusetts. As soon as a resident applies for RAFT monies or ERAF monies, that stops the eviction action. It's put on pause. And many people at Hillcrest have submitted applications, have gotten money and got their balances paid. But I do find, unfortunately, it takes someone to get into court before they take that serious enough to file an application. But there's a statute of Massachusetts is in place right now that once they file an ERAF or a RAFT application, the eviction action is put on pause.
Mr. Clifford, I have a question. Will we be able to send out notices to these residents prior to our next meeting in 2 weeks so that they'll be able to be in front of the board to discuss their individual cases?
I'm going to talk to town hall staff and make sure.
Okay.
I mean, I think in the past, Judy Hardigan did a lot of the heavy lifting for this, but Judy has resigned from the board
Right.
after many years of dedicated service. So I want to double check that and make sure that that has been done. So we will make sure that they get notice.
Town hall will make sure, those town hall
Yes.
staff.
Yep.
will make sure. Okay, thank you.
And who spearheads that? Who is the person that talks to town hall to be sure that the information is sent to the folks that need to have information sent? Provides us with the information, the paperwork that we need in order to review anything that may need to be reviewed prior to our meetings.
I think one of the challenges, Deb, is that Judy Hardigan, as was the elected tax collector, and she was in town hall, and she took on the additional duty of doing the administrative work of the rent control board. But she's not doing it anymore. Jen Constable, who's on this meeting, is the assistant town administrator. I'll speak with her to and make sure that we have some staff support for this. One of the problems is there is no budget for staff for the rent control board.
Right.
So that's something we are going to have to work out going forward.
Okay, so someone or a few will need on the rent control board may need to step up and do some administrative work, or is that
Hopefully
how I'm
not.
understanding?
Hopefully not too much.
Right, but some, so that we can all stay in on the same page.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, Jen, if you wanted to, Jen Constable is the assistant town administrator, for those of you that don't know her.
Thank you.
Jen's on now.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Jen.
Yeah, John and I will connect shortly after this meeting or later this week, and we'll be in touch with the board members. And in Judy's absence, we'll make sure that the administrative duties are addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would be willing to help if need be.
At your next meeting, Deb, the board is going to have to organize. You should probably vote to name a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk.
Okay,
Brian was generous enough to step forward for tonight, so we can at least move the meeting along. I do appreciate that, Brian.
I want to hide. Yeah.
So I think the board should vote to table this for 2 weeks as well, until your next meeting.
I'd make the motion to table it.
I
second the
second.
motion.
Mhm.
So no discussion? Then a vote? Unanimous?
Favor?
Anybody can, all right, so we're all gonna, I guess in 2 weeks, we'll schedule another Zoom. Pick this up. Hopefully we can get the people in the communities themselves, Hillcrest, or the representatives from the mobile housing group, Ava and Gina, who I respect very much. And get the word out in the community the best you can. In the meantime, I think the town will do what they can, or what we can do on whatever vehicles. I mean, we don't know that everybody's on Facebook. We don't know that everybody's on this or that. So a meeting in 2 weeks is pretty short order. And like I said, I'm not overly optimistic that the outcome will be exactly what everybody hopes. But let's do the best we can.
Is it
And
possible to have that meeting in person?
I'm not opposed to an in-person meeting. In fact, the fact that it was a Zoom meeting, I was like, well, okay, why not? And it's probably more convenient for people in the 5:30 time. So, some of us still work or do work, I should say. And so, whenever the meeting time is set, it's not going to be my responsibility as we sign off. I'll be signing off as chairman. It was just temporary tonight. It was also very enlightening, and to hear different perspectives about different aspects of this.
I just think in person is more conducive to good conversation and.
I think face-to-face is always
I
better.
agree, Stu.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
I mean, that's
agree.
why I was in the trade show and corporate event business for 35 years. So I believe in face-to-face all day long, So, and I would, and it should be open to the public. So it's exactly that. Yeah.
all right.
Well, thank you all.
All right. So I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Second that motion.
Okay. I think we're all in agreement. John, would you have any closing comments?
Thank you all for your work. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you.
John, very
Wanna
much.
say Thank you as well for.
Everybody
hearing us
reach
out.
out to me in any way you can or you'd like to. So thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Nice
All
meeting
right,
everyone.
that includes all our guests and the public, the people in the public,
Thank you.
and Ava and Gina. God bless you guys. All right.
You're
Thanks
very
for having
kind.
me.
Thank you.
You
Okay.
take care. You're very kind too. God,
Bye-bye.
and I mean that. So everybody have a wonderful night. All right. Take care.